everyone, I'm Melissa from Knitting the Stash, and this is episode 22 in the podcast series. Welcome to any new viewers, and welcome back to anyone who's been with me for many episodes or just a few. It's nice to see you all. I'm coming to you from Urbana, Illinois, where I'm a professor at the university here. And today is Saturday, and it's kind of suddenly a quiet moment in my house, so I thought I'd jump in front of the camera and do a quick podcast before the Labor Day weekend festivities really crank up. You can find me, if you're looking for me, just about everywhere as Knitting the Stash, on Ravelry and Instagram, on YouTube obviously, and on the blog, which is knittingthestash.wordpress.com. Thank you so much again, as always, for all the messages that I received from the last podcast and on the blog and via Ravelry. It's always great to connect with all of you, so thanks for being here and spending some time with me. Today's episode is all about, like the episode itself, it's all about kind of things in progress and fitting in the little bits and pieces in the space between. And so I've got a lot of little bits and bobs for you today. The first thing, I'll do some FO. I've got one little FO for you. I've got a work in progress, which I'm very curious to hear what you guys think and any suggestions for it. I have an update on Spencer's sweater from the last episode in the Grease, and lots of info about the Knit Together project. The squares are rolling in, and I can't wait to share a few of them with you. And I usually don't, but I have a couple little bits and things from the mailbox that I'll share too later as we go. So, first things first, what am I wearing? It's not a finished object. This is an older finished object, but it is the Ebba pullover by Diana WALLA, and this was my first real colorwork sweater, steeking and all. And I talk about it on a couple episodes back. If you want some more information on that, you can check out those other episodes. I love this sweater. It's really great. It's actually a crisp, kind of fallish day today. It's weird. The weekend's supposed to get hot, but today it's cool, and so I'm keeping warm. And it's kind of the perfect layer, and it seemed right to finally break out a sweater for the fall. My other finished, my real finished object for today is a skein of yarn that I spun up. Again, last couple weeks, it's just been like little bits of time here and there, grabbing some fiber, grabbing some yarn, and just having things happen in these spaces between other things happening, like the beginning of the semester, which kind of has been kicking my butt this last week. I'm teaching 3 classes in a row on Mondays and Wednesdays from about 9:30 in the morning until about 2 in the afternoon, and no breaks, no time in between, maybe 10 minutes in between. Grab a quick Cliff Bar and bike to my next class. So it's a little crazy, and you'll keep hearing that echo throughout this episode of like, well, there was crazy stuff going on, and then I managed to do this. So it's one of those things. If you love fiber and knitting, you just make it happen, I guess. So my finished object for the week is a skein of yarn, which I spun up, and we'll see if the camera will pick this up against my sweater, perhaps. Let's see. There you go. You can really see it there a little bit better. This was some fiber from, upside down. This was some fiber from Aloha Blue. Christina over at Aloha Blue does some beautiful work. This is a superwash Targhee Firestar Merino Targhee bat that this came from, and it was about 2 ounces. And Christina sent this over when I did a blog spot for her. Oh my gosh, maybe it was a year ago now. She sent this beautiful little 2-ounce bat and some yarn, and you should really check out her colorways and her fiber at Aloha Blue, and I'll link to her in the show notes. This spun up really quite beautifully, I thought, and it came out to be a very balanced yarn. I did a 3-ply, and I spun at a kind of medium ratio for this one. And so I took the 2-ounce bat and split it into 3 equal, about 0.8 ounce chunks, and spun each one to a bobbin and then 3-plied them together. really interesting spin because of the mix of fibers. Like I said, it's a Firestar, Targhee, Merino kind of mix here, and so it came out really cool and has some sparkles and some other colors in it. The bat itself, and I'm not sure if Christina's bats are all like this, but this one was really, it was a beautiful purple bat, but it was actually two 1 ounce bats. One was a pure kind of purple, and the other one had a lot of color and sparkle, greens and yellows and little bits and pieces of things. And so when I spun them, or when I broke up the bat, I actually took the all purple bat and spun that to one bobbin because of the weight, and then the other bat was a little bit bigger, so I split that in half and spun that to 2 different bobbins. So I ended up using the kind of pure purple to mute the other 2, which came out as kind of accents. And I love this fiber. It's really soft, really fun to spin up, and as you saw, it's kind of nicely plied, and the colors are great because the purple is my favorite color. And it came out kind of a nice, it's highlighted, I think, by the greens and the yellows and the reds and the blues and all the others, bits and things that are in here. So thank you, Christina, for that lovely bat. I finally spun it up and it's wonderful. And there's, you're probably thinking, that's not 2 ounces, and it's not. Because what I did with this yarn once I spun it up was to knit my square for the Knit Together project, and I'll show you that now so that you can see it. You can see the yarn all knit up. I went for a very plain and basic mitered square for my square for the blanket, and you can see how lovely this yarn knit up. Really, it came out really even. It's a nice 3-ply, so it's very plump. And I did the mitered square, so you can see the miters there, and on the back, this is what it looks like. Right? So I was really happy with the way that this knit up. And my story about my square is that the first blanket I ever made was a mitered square blanket. It was the Hue Shift Afghan. It's sitting over there on the couch. I can see it right now, from Knit Picks. And actually, I'll just grab it so you can see it. So this was my first blanket, and it's this beautiful Hue Shift Afghan from Knit Picks. And each of these squares is knit with 2 different colors, and they're mitered. And my son drags this blanket all over the house in the winter time, and it is still standing. This is like maybe 5 years old at this point. And I've showed it to you guys before. I think it's really beautiful when you kind of spread it out, the ways that the color kind of shifts. The color kind of shifts around the blanket. So I wanted to do a mitered square, tossing that aside, because it was my first blanket and it reminded me of working on blankets for the first time and practicing this center double decreases that you need for a mitered square. And the yarn itself is special because it came from this bat from Christina, and Christina was one of the, I think she was one of the few first folks who did interviews and blog spots with me. So it's kind of like I've got a soft place in my heart for her blog spot and for her fiber, and I'm finally getting to spin it up with and use some hand spun for my blanket square. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. I'm pretty happy with how this came out, and this pretty much happened in part because my son is in this traveling soccer league, and so we're often away over the weekends, and I often need something to grab and bring with me to his soccer games, just so that I can be busy in the car or at the field, and that was the nice simple thing to kind of pick up. I was in between projects and it worked out perfectly. So that's my finished object for the week. My work in progress for the week is also a little bit of a surprise to me. Those of you who watched episode 21, you know that I was talking about knitting a sweater for Spencer, and that is going to be the Denali by Nora Gone. And I was talking to you about trying to find wool and yarn that was in the grease. And so that sweater was 2 weeks ago. It was all planned, the yarn was ordered, and I heard from the Island Wool Company that they were actually they happened to be on their summer trip to the Faroe Islands right when I placed my order. So they were back and they were just dealing with the backlog of orders. And I needed 11 skeins of the Siri yarn, and they only had 10, and so Daniel at the company was really kind enough to email back and forth and try to figure out what I actually wanted to do about that. And basically either way he was going to have to order more yarn from the Faroe Islands. So so I switched over to this other Island Wool Company yarn, which is the SNAELDAN yarn, and that's the one that is produced in the mill on the Faroe Islands, and it's a mixture of both Faroese lanolin rich wool and some wool from the Falkland Islands. So I actually switched over to that yarn, and they were kind enough, great company, awesome customer service, really personal and personable, and he was so cool. He's like, you know what, because we had this little backlog and you know we didn't have quite enough skeins for you, we're going to throw in the extra skein that you need with this other yarn. And I was like, just love them, they're great. If you need lanolin rich yarn, go to the Island Wool Company. I'll put a link to them in the show notes. Awesome people over there. So that yarn is on its way, and so Spencer Sweater's on hold, and so you know me well enough to know that I was like dying to knit a sweater. So I actually had some yarn ready to go from another project. I had planned to use this particular yarn for a mint sweater, and I changed my mind and decided I was going to use it for the Georgetown sweater, which is what's going on here. So let me tell you a little bit about this project. Again, it's an in-between project. It's like I had the yarn, I had the pattern, and I just needed something to knit at the soccer game. So, so give me a couple weeks and I'll give you a sweater shell. Okay, first things first. I'm knitting this out of Targhee worsted weight yarn. Let me see if I can hold this up so that the camera will get it. So this is from Blue Moon, and you can get the Targhee worsted Blue Moon yarn at Eat Sleep Knit and probably a couple other places, but I know I got mine from Eat Sleep Knit. This is 100% Targhee wool, hand dyed, and it comes in these crazy hanks that are like 600 yards each, which is awesome for sweater knitting because that means less yarn joins. So this, I knit the entire shell of the sweater and I still have this much yarn left just from the first hank that I caked up. And I have a jumbo skein ball winder, thanks to my lovely husband who gave it to me as a Christmas gift a couple years ago. And so this jumbo skein winder, actually with the 600 yards, I usually re-skein my yarn or re-ball it after I run it through once, and then it's really tight, and so then I'll run it through again so that it'll loosen up and it can sit in the cake and not it can sit in the cake and not be kind of like scrunched up. But this one, it was at the limit of the jumbo ball winder, so the ball itself barely, the little arm of the ball winder was clearing it, but just barely. And I thought, if I try to recake this, it is just gonna be like, you know. So, and I knew I was gonna knit with it right away, so I just went with it, and all is well. But 600 yard hanks, that's pretty impressive. This is what the yarn knits up like. My swatch for the sweater. It's a beautiful blue that has kind of highlights of the dark blue, navy, and then a kind of lighter blue in there. And my swatch came out just under gauge for the Georgetown pattern, and so I'm a tight knitter, and I went up a needle size for the ribbing on the bottom, and then I went up a needle size for the rest of the body. And let me show you, for those of you who haven't seen Georgetown, this is a Hannah Fettig pattern, and this is what it looks like. It's become a fairly iconic sweater, I think. And I have my iPad today, so hopefully the pictures will come out a little better. Let me show you this guy. Where are you? This one. So you can see it's like an open front cardigan, really kind of relaxed and chill. And it knits up really fast. I'm using size 8 circulars for this, even though it's cardigan, so I'm going back and forth knitting the flat. One of the cool things is this is from Hannah Fettig's Home and Away collection, and I think it's Home and Away. Yeah, it's Home and Away. And in that collection, she does some cool things with setting up her sweater patterns so that you can either knit them so that they can be seamed or they can be virtually seamless. I'm doing the kind of seamless version of the Georgetown here. Now, The Georgetown is, you can kind of see it here, that it's really just a shell. The beginning of this is just a shell, where you actually are knitting the back and the sides and the shoulders. And I'll show you the back. You can see the side there. I feel like she needs to come up just a little bit for you to be able to see the bottom, which is kind of the cool part. So let me just raise her up a little bit. Okay, I think that'll, there we go. Now you can see the bottom. Handy dress forms. Okay, so you can see the side and kind of it hangs a little bit in the front. It's very like a loose kind of fitting, really just plain stockinette with a few decreases and then increases. Really, I mean, I think Hannah's pattern is brilliant in the way that she places her increases and decreases, because you can see it just, this model is my size and it fits just perfectly, and when I put it on, it fits just perfectly as well. And it has this kind of nice, which is something that I don't usually think I like in sweaters, but it has this kind of nice loose fit at the bottom that hits just over your hips actually. And I usually don't wear sweaters that long, but I like the way this one is coming out. So you can see the side there, and then I've pinned it on the front just so that you can kind of see how far the actual shell goes. Now in the pattern, she calls for then about a 4-inch band here that is actually 7 inches, and you fold it back over so that it ends up being a shawl collar. You saw it kind of falls down the front. And while I like that, and that's initially what drew me to the pattern, this kind of open front, pretty simple, nice cardigan, after I've knit up the shell, I'm actually going to modify it quite a bit. I did a few modifications on the actual body of the sweater. I added short rows to the back of the neck area, because if you add short rows, it allows the back to kind of sit down a little bit lower than the front, so that, you know, you get enough sweaters. This one has short rows in it too, and if you don't add short rows, this part can kind of pull down and the front can kind of ride up. But if you add short rows, it tends to sit a little bit more forward on your body. So I added a few short rows to the back, and I also modified the bind off for the shoulders. I didn't want to seam the shoulders 100%, so I did a 3-needle bind off on the shoulders, which I think is great structurally for sweaters. It helps everything, it gives it a really strong, kind of stable place to hang from. So those are my modifications thus far. But what I'm going to do now is, instead of knitting, instead of picking up stitches here and knitting this way and this way to create this band, I'm actually going to do a provisional cast on along the bottom here, and then I'm going to knit vertically up one side and around the other, and I'm going to do, I think, a kind of cable-y pattern. What inspired me to do this is when I was working on this blanket, which is the Stornoway Throw. Right, you guys will all remember this from a few podcasts ago. The border to this blanket is knit in just exactly that way. You do a kind of provisional cast on down on the bottom, and then you knit this border just along the edges of the blanket. And so I'm thinking a similar kind of thing could be done on the side of the sweater, where you pick up along you do your provisional cast on the bottom, and then you knit vertically, which will allow me to do some cable work. And I'm not going to do just straight, complicated, massive cables, because I don't think the balance of that would be quite right for this sweater. So I've been looking around on Ravelry just to get some ideas. I like the way this particular sweater looks. This is the Roxborough by Thea Coleman, and you can see again this is a kind of open front cardigan, but she's done a little bit of cable work on the edging. I think you can see it there. You'll be able to see it more clearly in this photo. You see that kind of edging that she's done, a little bit of rib and a little bit of cable. I kind of like the way that looks. There's also this pretty interesting vest this is the Pommier vest by Hilary Smith Callis, and she's done an open front with brioche running both ways. I don't think I'm going to do that, but it's an interesting idea. And there are just tons of great ideas on Ravelry about how to possibly do these cables, and I'm also kind of busy looking through Nora Gaughan's knitted cable source book and a couple other places to just get some ideas. I'm thinking I'm going to go for a kind of slim cable somewhere in here, and kind of pair it with some nice ribbing so that the cable isn't just this bold scarf looking thing on the front. It's a little bit more subtle and kind of built into some other textured stitches up the front. When I initially put this on, I thought to myself, God, this would be the perfect sweater for a hood. So that's always a possibility, to add a hood to the back. But I really love sweaters that have a nice kind of neckband that comes up around and kind of sits on your neck, keeps your neck warm, and has some beautiful texture around the back. So my thinking right now is just to go with the textured stitches up around the back of the neck and then down the next side. I'll keep you posted. I think this sweater will hopefully be finished by the next podcast, and I'll be able to show you what I ended up choosing, because I don't think Spencer's sweater yarn is going to show up anytime soon, and this is what I have on my needles now. So once I figure out exactly what I'm doing, I'll just go to it. And in the meantime, I can work on the sleeves, which are pretty standard sleeve cap, short rows, all the way down. I may do a little modification on the cuffs based on whatever cable pattern I pick for the front. So that's the plan. I feel like I'm getting more and more into like sweater design, and I like that a lot. I really like thinking about how construction works, being able to make the modifications I want to make and create a sweater that I really love. And I think Hannah Fettig's Georgetown pattern, the shell at least, is brilliant. And now I'm looking forward to kind of adding my own flair and twist to it to see what I come up with. So that's my work in progress. The Georgetown shell that's going to be modified with some cable texture. And I already told you about Spencer's sweater. So what is next? The Knit Together project. Okay, so Knit Together project. You guys know, if you've been watching the podcast, that we've got this Knit Together project going on all year, pretty much. And what I'm asking folks to do is send in sweater squares, 8-inch sweater squares, like the one I showed you earlier, right, about this size, 8 inches or so. And using some kind of yarn or fiber that means something to you. It could be homespun, like mine. It could be a pattern that you really have some attachment to and a story about. It could be fiber that you have an attachment to, some yarn that you picked up that has a good story, any of that kind of stuff. But the idea is for folks to knit these blanket squares, send them in to me, and I'm going to assemble a blanket that whoever sends me a square will be entered to win that final blanket. As part of this project, we also have some DPNs kind of making the rounds. So a lot of the initial squares that I've gotten have been from the bloggers and the podcasters that I sent some DPNs to. They've sent me their squares, and now their needles have gone on to other folks. And I've heard some really great stories about the needles going on to friends that they know, or people in France, or other podcasters, and so the needles are making their way around. If you get tagged with the needles, please do send a square to me and send the needles on to someone else. But if you just want to get involved, send me a square, PM me on Ravelry, and I'll be happy to get you involved in the Knit Together project. You can also check out the blog. I have a Knit Together project little tab at the top of the homepage, so that you can check out all the specs for how to knit a square and where to send it and how to figure out what to do, okay? But let me show you some of the beautiful squares that have come in. And I don't want to talk about all the stories because I want to send you over to their blogs and podcasts to hear their stories. Okay, this first one is from Mandy of the Little Golden Notebook blog, and she knit this beautiful textured square that has a little kind of riddle to it. So if you go over to her blog, the Little Golden Notebook, you can read about the riddle, and you'll hear the solution to the riddle. But I think it's really cool to see this kind of biased work in a knit square, and to know that there's a cool story behind it. So Mandy, thank you so much for sending your beautiful square, and she sent a little bit of the fiber and yarn that she knit this up with, which is lovely to see the two of them together. It's all steamed and set, and it's going to be fun to throw it together into the blanket. Let me share with you a couple others. Shirley from Handmade Habit sent a beautiful square. And Shirley is an artist of epic proportions, so she sent a little paper cutout as well, which is so beautiful. If you have a chance, go visit Shirley's blog, Handmade Habit, and check out her what she's been up to, craftiness and everything. This is, she sent some of her wool too. This is the shepherd's wool from Stonehenge Fiber Mill in East Jordan. All right, beautiful color. And this is the beautiful square she came up with. And one of the things I love about this square is that I sent some of the initial needles out with this great local to me yarn in New York, in Spencer, New York. Spencer, yay. Spencer, New York, this one was called Looney Tunis, and it's a Tunis yarn. And so she incorporated some of the Tunis yarn into her square as part of her project here. So you can go visit her blog and read about the process of designing this square and read about the other fiber that she used. And again, that's Shirley from Handmade Habit. And I received a great square with a cute dragon note from Tommy Trujillo of Squirrel Pie Productions. This is beautiful. Check this out. I love this square. She talks about the construction of this square over on her podcast, so you can check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes. This is hand spun that she worked up and then she knitted up into a square, and it just came out really bright and festive and beautiful. So thank you, Tommy, for sending this along. And again, all you have to do is check out the show notes so you can read about the stories of these squares over on other folks' blogs and podcasts. And today, in the morning, I was so excited to see that Amy Vanderhoek sent her square in, and she and I were talking on Ravelry about the Knit Together project, and she just wanted to get involved. And Amy, I'm so glad you did. Your square is beautiful. This is what she sent in, and I have to hold it up to the light so that you can see the really cool textured pattern she put on here. This heart that she knit into the square. Isn't that so cool? And she wrote in to say this is made from a skein of yarn that she won in a contest, and she said, I created the cable pattern myself. I love cables because it was the first difficult stitch I was able to complete. Thanks for allowing me to participate in the Knit Together project. And Amy, thank you so much for sending in a square. This is going to be an excellent addition to our blanket, our community blanket. So thank you to everyone who's sent in squares so far. Thanks for sending on the needles. And if you want to get involved, go check out the blog, Knit Together Project. All the details are there. And I'd love to have squares from all of you who are listening and watching, international, in the US, anywhere else. We've got squares coming from France, Ireland, the UK, Switzerland, you name it, they're coming in, and I'm really excited about it. So stay tuned for all of that. All right, last but certainly not least, I have a kind of little bits and bobs, things that came in the mail, and things that I just have to share with you guys. So many of you who watch this podcast also watch a lot of the podcasts that I watch. So Tommy Trujillo of Squirrel Pie Productions, or Rachel of Treehouse Knits, Rachel of Wool and Spinning, Sarah of Fiber Trek. And some of you hopefully watch Kate of the Hawthorn Crafts, Hawthorn Cottage podcast. And Kate sent some beautiful bags. She put up a shop update, and I rushed right over and had to get involved in her bag because I own one of her bags and I love it. And I just wanted to show you guys, if you haven't gotten a bag from Kate, you should. So this one, I picked out two. I had some birthday money from my dad. Thanks, Dad. So I got some really cool project bags. They're neat because I've showed them to you before. They fold over. They have snaps inside. They're padded. They're big enough for a sweater project. They're made flat bottomed. They have a nice strap on the side. And they're made from really cool fibers. I mean, really cool, yeah, there we go. Really cool fabrics. So that's one. And then this is the other one. This is where my sweater has been living, in this really funky bag. And for those of you who know I'm into science fiction and comics and all kinds of other super nerdy things, this seemed like the perfect super nerdy bag. So this is my like comic booky bag, thanks to Kate. This one has contrasting innards that are the same kind of nice colors. And like I said, my Georgetown has been living in this one. There's plenty big for a sweater, and they fold over if you're working on something smaller like socks or hats or anything like that. So Kate, excellent work. Love the bags. I'm so happy to have 3 of them now that I can keep all my projects safe in and travel to and from soccer tournaments and the whatnot with them. So thank you very much. They're excellent. And the last thing I was going to mention is Spinzilla. Spinzilla is coming up. I posted about it on the blog. This is my second year joining up on a different team. My team from last year is no longer, so I picked another team. And Spinzilla is a great week of just spinning, camaraderie, encouragement. You know, it doesn't matter if you're a beginner spinner, if you're an advanced spinner, if you have a lot of time or a little time. It's a really great, fun thing to participate in. It costs about 15 bucks to get signed up, and all that money goes to a good association. I think it's the Needlework Association of America, something like that. Basically where they help get kids involved in fiber crafts and fiber arts. So all for a good cause, and you get to have some fun. It's the week of October 2nd to the 8th, and I plan on spinning when I'm not teaching or doing my regular job. One thing I'm going to spin up, and I've talked to you guys about this a little bit before, I have a backlog, as do most of us, of lots of different fibers. This is some Shetland wool top that came from Hello Yarn. I got it in a D-stash. It's from 2014, one of the fiber clubs. And this looked to me like it would be perfect for a gradient spin, so I'm going to do a gradient spin with this. Maybe as a warm-up to Spinzilla, maybe as Spinzilla itself, you never know. I know people who are doing sweater quantities of yarn, people who are just having fun with it and just spinning up some stuff from their stash, people who have been hoarding yarn all year and they're going to use it up for Spinzilla. Whatever you do, it's great. And if you want to get involved or if you need more information, you can always check out their website, which I'll post in the show notes, or I'm always happy to field whatever questions I can answer about the experience of doing Spinzilla if anybody's interested. So that is coming up, and that's exciting. Also, the Wisconsin Sheep and Wool Festival is coming up next weekend, and I am hoping to get up there for Saturday. So if I do, I'll try to make a little video for you guys, and if you happen to be there too, let me know in the comments or PM me on Ravelry, and I'd love to see you out there next weekend at the Wisconsin Sheep and Wool Festival. I think that's about it today for things in between. We're about to hit lunchtime, and I've got dinner plans, and my son has friends coming over, so it's gonna be a crazy day. But it's nice to spend a little bit of time with you guys, and I hope you all have a wonderful couple weeks until I see you again. Check out that Knit Together project. Please get involved. I love seeing these squares show up in the mailbox, and I can't wait to put these blankets together, if there's more than one, at least one blanket together, and share it with whoever out there in the community is sent in a square. So be well, I will see you guys next time. Thanks.